Focus on Headline. And let's take a look at what major issues are making the headlines today on Focus on Headline. For this, joining us in the studio today, we have our reporters in Yoon Suk Yeol and Kim Min-ji. Guys, welcome back.
Hello.
Good to see you once again. We're going to kick things off with some diplomatic affairs. President Yoon Suk Yeol is embarking on a significant tour of Central Asia aimed at strengthening ties and enhancing cooperation with some of the region's resource-rich countries. Now, this tour, which officially kicked off today, will last until June 15th. It is set to play a crucial role in South Korea's international strategy. Min-ji, you're going to start us off here. What can you tell us about President Yoon's three-nation tour there?
Well, President Yoon Suk Yeol and First Lady Kim Gun-hee are set to embark on a three-nation tour of Central Asia starting today, June 10th, and running through June 15th. Now, this tour aims at strengthening a supply chain cooperation with these resource-rich countries and promoting the K-Silk Road initiative. First, President Yoon will visit Turkmenistan from June 10th to 11th. During his stay, he will hold a summit with President Sadar Berdimuhamedov and sign a memorandum of understanding to expand bilateral cooperation. Now, Turkmenistan, known as the world's fourth largest natural gas producer, will discuss measures to increase the presence of Korean companies in the energy sector. In fact, Turkmenistan's state-run newspaper has praised this visit as a demonstration of active exchanges at the highest levels, highlighting the special ties and potential for cooperation in areas such as capital, technology, and infrastructure. Then from June 11th to 13th, President Yoon will make a state visit to Kazakhstan. On June 12th, he will meet with President Tokayev at the presidential palace to sign an MOU aimed at strengthening their strategic partnership. Kazakhstan's wealth of key minerals like uranium and chromium will make mineral supply chain cooperation a key topic of discussion. Finally, President Yoon will visit Uzbekistan from June 13th to 15th. He will arrive in Tashkent on June 13th for a compatriots dinner, followed by a meeting with President Shavkat Mirziyoyev on June 14th. Uzbekistan's abundant resources, including uranium, molybdenum, and tungsten will be at the forefront of their discussions. Now, in addition to these individual visits, President Yoon has announced plans for a summit next year in South Korea with leaders from Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. This summit aims to establish the highest level platform for cooperation between South Korea and Central Asia.
You probably did a better job in pronouncing some of these minerals. Because you fail to understand that there are so many key materials out there that are required. And there was a great deal of emphasis on critical minerals. If you remember during the Korea-Africa Summit, which took place just last week for 2 days, right? And so there was a lot of MOUs and a lot of agreements being signed in regards to procuring as much critical minerals as possible, because that's the new thing right now. If all the countries were fighting for oil back in the days, now it's like all these critical minerals that are needed for things like secondary battery, for instance. I know there's a lot of emphasis on renewable energy, and renewable energy comes from a lot of these sources that we just talked about right now, which is why it's not surprising that a lot of us can't pronounce a lot of these chemical minerals.
We have to learn from now on.
We have to learn from now on, and go back to learning chemistry once again, which, by the way, was one of my worst subjects in my entire school years out there. But we'll keep our listeners out there keeping tab on the three-nation visit by President Yoon Suk Yeol and see what kind of discussions are being made over there. Moving on here, in response to North Korea's balloon attacks, so to speak, we've mentioned the 1,000 or so balloons carrying trash sent over to South Korea last week. South Korea did resume its broadcast via loudspeaker towards the north for the first time in 6 years. And despite North Korea's earlier announcement to temporarily halt these trash balloon launches, they warned of resuming if South Korean leaflets were found again. We know that the South Korean activist has again sent some more balloons towards the north. And of course, the North Koreans responded quite firmly with this. Seeing, let's get the latest in this back and forth between the two Koreas.
Sure. Tensions between the two Koreas continue to escalate with conditional provocations from both sides. North Korea flew approximately 1,000 balloons filled with waste towards the south from late last month to early this month. And they indicated that if the factory groups in South Korea continued sending propaganda leaflets, the attacks would resume. And in response, South Korean defector groups sent another batch of anti-Pyongyang leaflets, prompting North Korea to launch more waste-filled balloons between the June 6th and 7th. And South Korea Joint Chiefs of Staff confirmed an additional 310 balloons this time. And in reaction to North Korea's persistent provocations, the National Security Council convened and decided to restart loudspeaker broadcast into North Korea. As of 5 p.m. on Sunday, the South Korean military reactivated multiple fixed loudspeakers along the front lines, broadcasting for about 2 hours. And this marks the first use of these psychological warfare tools since the Panmunjom Declaration of April 2018, when both fixed and mobile loudspeakers were dismantled. And the broadcast included the Voice of Freedom produced by the South Korean military, capable of reaching 10 to 30 kilometers depending on equipment and time of day. And the Joint Chiefs of Staff stated that further broadcasts depend on North Korea's actions, but with North Korea continuing their balloon launches despite the broadcast, it's expected that South Korea will operate the loudspeaker again on Tuesday, June 11th, which is tomorrow.
Yeah, we talked about how North Korea is not a big fan of these loudspeaker broadcast campaigns, and that has led to a number of other provocations in response in North Korea in the past, like, for example, shellings that took place, I believe, back in 2015. But this, it's effective in many ways, right? The soldiers, for instance, or even the citizens who might be living in these border villages, but which is why North Korea reacts very sensitively to this. Can you tell us what exactly was aired on Sunday?
Sure. I assume that our listeners are not very familiar with the process of broadcasting, and I was not either. And to explain in detail, it began with the national anthem, 애국가, being played at 4:55 p.m. yesterday, when certain radio frequencies were matched in 탄현면 파주 City, Gyeonggi-do Province, and Chuncheon, Gangwon-do Province. And the broadcast began at 5 p.m. with the radio announcer saying, "Hello, Koreans in North Korea. We will start broadcasting the free speech that conveys the sound of truth and hope." And the content of the loudspeaker broadcast included news about the suspension of the September 19 military agreement, briefings from the Ministry of National Defense, and international reactions to North Korea's missile launches. Additionally, broadcast highlighted South Korea's technological achievements, such as Samsung's global success with smartphones, and reported on North Korean domestic issues like the increased crackdown on foreign media consumption. And the first part of the broadcast concluded with weather forecasts and market trends in North Korea in details. Then, from 5:45 p.m., the second part was broadcast to explain the difference between Seoul and Pyongyang dialect, and K-pop songs such as BTS Dynamite and Butter, and songs of 볼빨간 사춘기와 Ball 4 were also played in between.
Yeah, so I mean, it was done in the past, right? It's the same way that was done back 6 years ago when they decided they were going to suspend the loudspeaker campaigns. And I think back then it was like, what was it? They played like Psy's Gangnam Style, I think was what was going on, because that was like the cool song, or that was, right? But still, it kind of depicted the affluency of the South Koreans and things like that. But there are some, I guess, divided opinions on the use of the loudspeaker campaigns. What are some of the experts saying in regards to this?
Well, some pundits say if you send a broadcast through loudspeaker, even people in Kaesong, North Korea, can listen to it. Again, according to South Korean military officials, it reaches 10 to 30 kilometers depending on the time of the day. And on the other hand, others argue that it is difficult to check whether the sound spreads cleanly and accurately to such a distance. And there is also an opinion that South Korean residents and soldiers staying in neighboring areas suffer great damage from the noise as well. And opinions are also divided on how to respond to the dumping of waste balloons. There is a Supreme Court precedent that says distribution of leaflets by North Korean defectors organizations should be allowed as freedom of expression. But some argue that considering the public's damage that would return when the spraying of anti-Pyongyang leaflets continued, other provisions of the law should have been used to prevent such acts, such as Aviation Security Act, and consequently prevent the launch of waste balloons.
Yeah, so even with this, among South Koreans, right, it's divided because one can argue that although for the most part, it's North Korea provoking first, right? And South Korea responds to that. Whereas there's never really been a whole lot of response to it. They just send out a message saying that they denounce the ballistic missile launches, or we're going to bring this up to the UN Security Council, which nothing gets done there anyways. But there's never really any actions, maybe some joint air drills that happen with the United States, right? But for this one, they're saying that it was the South Korean activists who provoked North Korea first, right? They sent the balloons first, and North Korea said, don't send it, stop sending the trash. They called it trash, right? And it was in response to that they sent trash of their own because they know that no North Korean propaganda leaflets are going to convince South Koreans that North Korea has it really well and that we have it really bad. And so instead what they do is just send 1,000 balloons carrying trash and manure and all that stuff. And so they said, listen, North Korea said, we're going to stop this for now, but if you start sending it again, we're going to start all over again, which then in response to the 1,000 or so balloons that came through, these South Korean activists, who, by the way, former North Korean defectors, sent balloons again filled with USBs, with like K-dramas and music and things like this, and Made It Up over in London actually brings up a pretty good point here. Can the artists veto the use of their songs in their broadcasts? Well, I'm assuming not, right? It's not the case. But what about then the activists who are putting these songs in a USB? Are they illegally spreading the songs around, right? Are they, because you're not allowed to distribute the songs that you have, and that's all of it, right? What if an artist goes, I don't want my song to be used in this conflict with North Korea? I don't think they have a choice in this. I think they just broadcast all this, but it would be quite a scene if we see any North Korean soldiers start humming to smooth like butter. Comes out. It's a earworm of a song, to be honest with you. Well, we knew that in response to the loudspeaker broadcasts and the leaflets that were sent by the activists, that North Korea was not going to sit idly by and silent. We did get a severe warning from North Korean Workers' Party Deputy Director Kim Yo-jung. She's also the younger sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Tell us, Minju, what she had to say.
Well, tensions have escalated between North and South Korea following recent provocations. On June 9th, the North Korean Workers' Party's Deputy Director Kim Yo-jung issued a stark warning to South Korea. She threatened that if South Korea continues to scatter leaflets and broadcast loudspeaker messages across the border, North Korea will undoubtedly respond. Now, Kim Yo-jung's statement, distributed by the Korean Central News Agency, the KCNA, indicated that North Korea had initially planned to end their countermeasures on June 9th. However, the situation has since changed. She claimed that on June 8th and early on June 9th, North Korea scattered 7.5 tons of toilet paper across the border using over 1,400 balloons. According to her, these were just toilet papers without any political propaganda. So she accused South Korea for creating a crisis environment by resuming loudspeaker provocations, which have been halted for years. Kim strongly condemned what she described as South Korea's quote-unquote messy and childish behavior, warning that the daily life of South Koreans will be disrupted by continuous littering of tissues. So Kim Yo-jung sternly warned Seoul to immediately stop and refrain from any dangerous behavior that could lead to further confrontation. And although she mentioned new responses, she didn't really specify what those responses would entail. Earlier that day, the South Korean military had resumed loudspeaker propaganda broadcast to North Korea for the first time in 6 years, and this was in response to North Korea's use of balloons to scatter the toilet paper across the border.
Well, I mean, the problem is it wasn't only toilet paper. I don't know why blatant lies like this come out because, I mean, there were pictures and even from the public, right, what was inside these plastic bags filled with trash. There was like batteries, there was like magazine newspapers, and like manure was the worst part, right? I mean, you can't go any worse than that. And so it wasn't only toilet paper. If it was only toilet paper, kind of like, okay. I mean, it's not bad. It's trash, but it's not bad. But there was some disgusting, filthy stuff there. By the way, South Korea actually did not resume the loudspeaker campaign today. So just because they resume it doesn't mean that it goes on for 24/7, 7 days a week. It's on and off and on and off. And some of the experts are maybe saying that this was in response to North Korean leader's younger sister Kim Yo-jong's remarks, maybe trying not to raise the tensions too much because we have seen North Korea respond pretty terribly with this. Again, shelling that we saw back in 2015 in response to the loudspeakers. But they said that they're going to look at the situation, work flexibly to see whether or not they're going to resume it. And it's not going to be a daily thing. But today, the loudspeaker message campaign is halted just for now. We'll keep a close tab on that. Let's move on here. The third meeting of the Seoul-Washington Nuclear Consultative Group, or the NCG, established under last year's Washington Declaration by President Yoon and Biden during their summit, is taking place in Seoul today, with North Korea's nuclear threat looming and their provocations. This meeting expected to be a turning point ahead of the joint exercises in August. Sian, let's get more on this.
Right. The NCG was created to strengthen the extended deterrence against North Korea's advancing nuclear capabilities. And following the agreement during the Washington summit in April last year, the two nations have been working on the practicalities with the group, now nearing completion. And today, South Korea and U.S. announced that they have completed a review of a joint guidelines document containing guidelines for responding to North Korea's nuclear attacks. Previously, South Korea relied heavily on the U.S. extended deterrence or nuclear umbrella policy, but now the NCG aims to enable joint planning and operations, forming what experts call a South Korea-U.S. integrated extended deterrence policy. And the goal is to solidify the nuclear cooperation framework between the two countries, ensuring its continuity regardless of future government changes. And the U.S. and South Korea plan to finalize the NCG soon and apply it during the Ulji Freedom Shield exercises in August. And the group will address various scenarios, including deterring North Korea's nuclear threats and executing defensive and retaliatory measures in case of an attack. Last month, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un condemned the U.S.-South Korea Air Force drills as unforgivable provocations. With the NCG in operation, North Korea's reactions are expected to escalate. But in the ongoing show of force, the U.S.-South Korea-U.S. military demonstrations are also set to intensify. Recently, a U.S. B-1B strategic bomber participated in joint drills with the South Korean Air Force, dropping precision-guided bombs for the first time in 7 years, sending a clear warning to North Korea. And with the NCG fully operational, we can expect more frequent and robust joint exercise involving U.S. strategic assets.
Yeah, not to mention there was talks about Freedom Edge, right? This is the trilateral multi-domain exercise that's going to be conducted between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo, which is going to be the first of its kind, I believe. And so how North Korea is going to respond to all of this, we'll have to see. But tensions, when you think it was at its peak, it's not at the peak. It's rising even further right now. We're going to continue on with this ongoing conflict between the government and the medical community. We have the Korean Medical Association, the KMA, announcing a plan of leave of absence on June 18th. That's next Tuesday, which could have significant implications for patients across the country. Now, mind you, the vast majority of the members of the Korean Medical Association are private practitioners who run their own clinic. So we're talking about those that run their own clinics who many, I guess, patients have been relying heavily on ever since the walkout of the residents and interns. So this could further lead to another medical vacuum. Minji, let's get the latest details of this.
So the Korean Medical Association, the KMA, announced on Sunday their plan to launch an all-out strike on June 18th. This comes as the ongoing conflict between the government and medical community over healthcare reform shows no sign of resolution. The KMA's planned collective action is in solidarity with thousands of trainee doctors who have walked out since late February, representing around 140,000 physicians nationwide, including those from general hospitals and private clinics. The KMA conducted a survey where 90.6% of the 70,800 members supported the organization's hardline stance against the government's medical reform plan. Additionally, 73.5% agreed to participate in the collective action. Out of approximately 112,000 active members, 63.3% took part in the vote, which ran from Tuesday to Friday. And based on these results, the association decided to go on a strike on June 18th and hold a mass rally. Now, whether the strike will continue after that day depends on the government's response, according to the association. The KMA emphasized that their goal is not to strike, but to halt the government's unsubstantiated plan to increase medical school admissions, and they urged the government to recognize the flaws in their policy and stop the expansion, allowing for dialogue without the need for collective action. And this is not the first time the medical community went on a strike. The most recent one was, I believe, in 2020, but back then the participation of these private practitioners was very low. I think it was in a single digit percentage, but the strike this time is a little bit different because it is expected to have a more significant impact, as professors of Seoul National University College of Medicine and the Seoul National University Hospital said that they will suspend outpatient care and regular surgeries indefinitely starting from June 17th, except for emergency and intensive care.
Well, 2020, the reason why there was a very small percentage of striking doctors is because that was at the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic. And despite the fact that even right now, the public sentiment towards the doctor isn't so good, it would be disastrous if they decided to strike at the middle of a pandemic. And so I think that's the reason why we saw this. But it is a significant number of participants, considering, again, the fact that we still have many of the trainee doctors who are still part of their walkout, have not returned to their workplaces. It does seem like despite some of these administrative orders and legal measures that the government has threatened to issue, they are kind of still remaining firm with their unified stance. So what kind of reaction has the announcement sparked from the patient organizations, though?
So the strike has faced significant criticism from patient organizations. They accuse the KMA and striking doctors of extreme selfishness, calling for administrative and judicial actions against them. For instance, the Korea Alliance of Patient Organization has expressed frustration, stating that neither the government nor the doctors are prioritizing the well-being of patients who are being held hostage in this prolonged standoff. So public fatigue over this medical standoff is continuously growing.
Yeah, so we had some announcements from the health ministry earlier today. If there is a closure rate that exceeds 30% at the city or county level, they're going to issue an order for doctors to resume to work. All right. So let's say the doctors or the private hospital decides not to comply with the government's order to resume work. They're looking at a number of issues right now. Number one, the government's threatening a suspension of their medical licenses for up to 1 year, imprisonment of up to 3 years, a fine of up to 30 million won. That comes out to a little more than 21,000 US dollars. And I believe there is a 15-day suspension of business being imposed as well for the private practitioners who decide they're going to close despite the government's order here. So the government is coming back really strong against this. And the fact that they're still fighting over this, even though the quota for next year, the 2025 academic year, has been finalized, is a little bit absurd here. But nevertheless, we also have another issue. That's the Seoul National University Medical School professors. They have announced that they're going to be taking part in a collective action or a collective strike. In response, the government plans to issue practice orders and leave notifications to doctors who run these local clinics who form the core of the KMA. Seong, let's get a little bit more on this.
Yes, with the KMA planning a large-scale strike on June 18th, the government has expressed strong regret and announced legal measures. And Health and Welfare Minister Cho Kyoo-hong criticized the collective medical strike during a Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasure headquarters meeting, stating that such actions which threaten the lives and rights of citizens and patients are absolutely unacceptable. And the government has outlined strict countermeasures. Citing the Medical Service Act, they plan to issue practice orders and mandatory leave notifications to doctors who run local clinics. And they also announced the initiation of a legal review to determine if the KMA's encouragement of collective action violates the Fair Trade Act. And the government aims to pressure KMA leaders and diminish the momentum of private practitioners' participation to minimize the impact of the strike. On the other hand, KMA leaders are encouraging participation through social media. Lee Myung-taek, the head of KMA, even stated that I'll go to the jail. I'll take all the legal responsibilities, so please participate. But the actual participation rate of private clinics remains uncertain, so that's something we have to keep an eye on. And as the government issued medical orders and leave of absence reports to practitioners, medical institutions that want to take leave of absence must report by the June 13th.
Yeah, I don't know if all private practitioners are in par with this, because I had to go to my local doctor recently because of my kid, and it turns out that they're going full throttle. 7 days they're open. I said, you open on Sundays too? And they said, well, I mean, there's people seeking medical care,
right.
And all the hospitals, all the major hospitals don't have the interns and residents and things like that, and there is a more demand for doctors, and we have to open up. And I said, kudos to you. You know, you're doing what should be done right now, and that's catering to the patients. Today, marking a significant anniversary in South Korea's history. We commemorate the 37th anniversary of the June 10th Democratic Uprising. Now, this pivotal event led to the constitutional reform of the country's direct presidential election system and is really a cornerstone of South Korea's democratic development. Now, alongside this commemoration, we're witnessing some intense political maneuvering between the rival parties regarding the formation of the 22nd National Assembly and the key committee chairmanships there. We talked about how there's been already a rift between the rival parties even at the very start of the formation of the 22nd National Assembly. Minji, let's get the latest on this.
Well, leaders from both the ruling and opposition parties attended the 37th anniversary of the June 10th Democratic Uprising, also known as the June Struggle for Democracy, on today. The ceremony was held at the Seoul Metropolitan Government Multi-Purpose Hall with the attendance of Hwang Woo-yeol, Emergency Committee Chairman of the PPP, Sung Il-jong, Secretary General of the PPP, and Park Chan-dae, floor leader of the DP. However, today's commemoration was set against a backdrop of intense political maneuvering as DP is considering convening a plenary session to form the 22nd National Assembly on its own. Now, DP, holding a majority of seats, has requested National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik to convene a plenary session to elect their share of presiding officers, even if it means proceeding it unilaterally.
Yeah, and the key contention here is the committee seats for certain committees, like I believe for the Judiciary Committee. I think that's the big one, because that's the major one where the passing of the bills are being exchanged back and forth. But what's the major point of contention between the ruling and opposition parties and the political maneuvering?
So a major point of contention is, as you mentioned, the formation of the 18 parliamentary standing committees for the Assembly's 4-year term. The central dispute is over who will chair the 3 major committees: the Legislation and Judiciary Committee, the House Steering Committee, the Science ICT Broadcasting and Communications Committee. So both parties want to chair all 3. Traditionally, the party with the most parliamentary seats takes the speaker position, and the second-ranked party takes the chair of the legislative committee. So the biggest rival parties have distributed these committee leadership seats rather than embracing a winner-take-all approach. However, this practice is not always respected. In 2020, the Democratic Party, then the ruling party, monopolized all the standing committee chair seats, which is a first since 1988. And according to the National Assembly Act, the parties must determine the heads of the standing committees by Friday. Expectations for a smooth resolution are low as the major parties have spent nearly a month arguing over these committees.
Yeah, and if you remember, that was shortly after the conclusion of the 21st general elections, where the DP again overwhelming victory against the then opposition People Power Party, which is why you saw something like this. But again, I mean, keep talking about these conflicts between the rival parties. Not enough discussions on bills to be passed to help improve the livelihoods of the people. On Monday, the main opposition Democratic Party's Supreme Council approving an amendment to the party's constitution and regulations. This amendment allows for adjustments to the deadline by which the party leader must resign if they wish to run for president. However, you're not seeing criticism just from outside of the party, from the rival party members, but also within the party. Saying, let's get more on this.
Sure. The amendment permits exceptions to the rule that requires the party leader to resign 1 year before running for a presidential election. But while the Democratic Party explains this as a necessary measure to avoid a leadership vacuum in emergency situation, many believe that the timing of this change when party leader Lee Jae-myung is likely to seek re-election suggests it is tailored specifically for Lee. And according to the current party regulations, if Lee aims to run in the 2027 presidential election after his re-election as the party leader, he would need to resign by March 2026. And if the amendment is finalized, he could remain in his position through the local elections in June 2026 before stepping down to prepare for the presidential race. In addition, the DP passed a measure to include a 20% vote from party members in the election of the Speaker of the National Assembly and the party's floor leader as well. And this seems to be a response to the discontent among party members after Yoon Suk was elected as Speaker over the more popular lawmaker Cho Myung. But this move has also sparked criticism as the Speaker of the National Assembly should represent the entire populace, and it is seen as inappropriate to factor in votes from party members rather than from elected lawmakers.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about how leading up to the April general elections, I mean, granted, it worked out really well for Lee Jae-myung, the party leader Lee Jae-myung, but there was a lot of internal conflict within the DP members, saying that Lee Jae-myung, with his legal liabilities, that he's going to be too much of a liability for the party, and that they need to find new leadership and so forth. And this whole election of Yoon Suk instead of Cho Myung was another sign of the internal conflicts that are coming out here. But speaking of legal liabilities, the prosecution is reportedly set to indict Lee Jae-myung this week in relation to the Sangbangul illegal remittance to North Korea case, which, by the way, a former vice governor of Gyeonggi province was sentenced just last week.
Right. Following the heavy sentence handed down to Lee Hwa-young, the former vice governor of Gyeonggi-do province on June 7th, the prosecution views the two as co-conspirators and is accelerating its indictment process against Lee Jae-myung. And the charges against DP leader Lee include third-party bribery, violations of the Foreign Exchange Transactions Act, and breaches of the Inter-Korean Exchange and Cooperation Act. The prosecution believes that during his tenure as Gyeonggi-do governor, all illegal transactions with North Korea by former Sangbangul chairman Kim Sung-tae were conducted with Lee's approval. But Lee denies these allegations, stating he was never informed about such actions. Although the first trial of Lee Hwa-young concluded that Sangbangul transferred $8 million to North Korea on behalf of Gyeonggi-do province, it did not determine whether Lee Jae-myung approved these actions.
That's right. Lee Hwa-young given a 9.5-year sentence for this in the first trial. I think the prosecution was seeking something like 15 years, but there might be an appeal on this. We got some other weather updates to round things out here. And if you've been tuning into our program for the past few years now, anytime we talk about the weather in our segment, it's terrible stuff. Korea Meteorological Administration issuing already the first heat warning of the summer for parts of Yeongnam region, including Daegu and Ulsan. Now, granted, Daegu is notoriously hot. They're often called teprika, right? It's hot there. Minji, let's get the latest on the weather.
Well, on June 10th, today, yesterday, is it?
June 10th is today.
Oh, sorry. June 10th today. A heat warning was issued for parts of Yeongnam region, including Daegu and Ulsan. Now, this is the first heat warning of the summer, and the Korea Meteorological Administration issued the warning for Daegu and western Ulsan, Gyeongsangbuk-do provinces Yeongcheon, Gyeongsan, Cheongdo, and Gyeongju, as well as Gyeongnam provinces Kimhae and Changnyeong at 10 a.m., and it took effect immediately. A heat advisory is issued when the maximum daily temperature of 30 degrees Celsius or higher is expected to last for more than 2 days, and they're also issued when temperatures are expected to rise rapidly or when significant damage is expected during a prolonged heat wave. Last year, the first heat advisory was issued on June 17th, and by comparison, this year's heat wave has been in effect a week earlier. So given these conditions, it is really important to take care of your health. In most parts of the country's perceived temperatures will be 31 degrees Celsius or higher, which is expected to continue for the foreseeable future. So please stay hydrated, avoid strenuous outdoor activities, and take precautions to protect yourself from the heat.
Yeah, even the capital Seoul, today's high is 30 degrees, tomorrow's high 31, Wednesday 31, Thursday 32. Friday, 33 degrees is the Friday high, and it dips down slightly to 30s and 29.
But Busan is relatively cool, so if you want to avoid the heat wave, you can go to Busan.
I don't know if I'm going to spend hundreds of dollars to visit Busan just to get away from the heat, and your relatively cooler is 27 degrees, which is not cooler per se. So if you really want to get out, it's just get a stay indoors, but can't overuse the air conditioner, electricity and stuff, right? Guys, thank you very much for your reports. Have a safe one, and we'll see you guys again.
Stay cool, everyone.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang Radio application, or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.